The desert stretched endlessly, a golden ocean of dunes shimmering beneath the twin suns. Heat bent the horizon into waves, making the distant ridges look like mirages dancing just out of reach. Somewhere within this wasteland, buried beneath centuries of shifting sands, lay the stone tablet that had consumed David's life. He stumbled over a ridge, sweat burning his eyes, and finally dropped his pack beside a slab of half-buried rock. He brushed the sand away, his hands trembling with excitement. Symbols shimmered faintly against the stone, not carved but scorched into the surface by something older than any civilization on Earth. For months he had chased rumors of this artifact. Whispers in trade posts, fragments of half-burned journals, even the drunken confessions of alien explorers who swore they'd seen humans carrying copies of the markings centuries ago. Every lead brought him deeper into alien territory, far from the safe orbit of human colonies. But now, finally, it was here. David pulled out his scanner, but the device screeched with static and died the moment he aimed it at the tablet. Typical. This wasn't something that wanted to be measured. He pressed his hand to the symbols, tracing the grooves. The language was unfamiliar, but the shapes felt purposeful, like a map. He could almost see rivers, mountains, and a central mark that glowed faintly when his fingers brushed across it. Finally, he whispered, the map to the resting place. A shadow flickered across the sand. Too quick. He turned, but the desert looked empty. His hand instinctively went to the pistol at his belt. Nothing, just the silence of the dunes. When he looked back, the stone tablet was gone. David froze. The sand still shifted where it had been resting, as though it had been yanked away by invisible hands. But no, there, in the distance, a figure darted between dunes, the sunlight catching a streak of silver hair. "Hey!" he shouted, already scrambling to his feet. The figure didn't stop. David bolted after them, sliding down the dune and racing across the hot sand. His boots sank with every step, his lungs burning, but the thief was fast, too fast. As he closed the distance, he saw she wasn't human. Her slender frame moved with inhuman grace, her skin a faint shade of violet that caught the sunlight, her long ears twitching as she ran. She glanced back, and for the first time he saw her face. Sharp eyes, glowing faintly blue, full of determination and mischief. She smirked before leaping over a ridge and vanishing again. David cursed under his breath and pushed harder. He caught her finally at a cluster of jagged rocks. She'd paused just long enough to study the map, her fingers glowing faintly as she traced the symbols. When she noticed him closing in, she slipped the tablet into a satchel across her chest and drew a curved blade that shimmered with alien energy. "Stop!" David shouted, raising his hands. "That's mine." Her laugh was sharp, mocking. "Yours? Do humans carve stone with fire? Do humans hide sacred paths in the desert? No, this belongs to my people, and I will see the prophecy fulfilled." David gritted his teeth. "Prophecy doesn't put food in my mouth. I've been chasing this thing for a year. I'm not letting some thief." She lunged forward. The blade hissed through the air, but David rolled aside, sand spraying into his face. He yanked his pistol free, but before he could fire, she was already on him again, blade clashing against the gun with a sharp crack. Sparks flew. Her movements were quick, practiced, almost like a dance. David, on the other hand, was fighting to survive. He ducked another strike, grabbed her wrist, and twisted. The blade clattered into the sand. For a moment, their eyes locked, hers burning with fury, his with stubborn resolve. Then she did something unexpected. She smiled. "You're not as slow as I thought, human." Before he could react, she kneed him in the chest, shoved him back, and scooped up the blade in one fluid motion. By the time David scrambled to his feet, she was already climbing the rocks, leaping from stone to stone like some desert phantom. "Wait!" he shouted again, though his voice cracked with exhaustion. But she didn't wait. She disappeared into the canyon beyond, leaving only her laughter echoing against the stones. David stood there, panting, his chest aching from the blow. He kicked the sand in frustration. "Damn it! That was supposed to be his discovery. His chance to finally prove that humans weren't just scavengers in the galaxy, that they could uncover mysteries greater than any alien race. And now it was gone, stolen by some violet-skinned girl with quick hands and quicker feet. Still, he couldn't just give up. He shouldered his pack, tightened his grip on the pistol, and followed her tracks into the canyon. Hours passed. The canyon grew darker as the suns lowered, the jagged rocks casting long shadows that felt like watching eyes. David's instincts screamed that he wasn't alone. Sure enough, faint chittering echoed from above. He glanced up and saw pale shapes crawling along the cliffs. Desert scavengers, six-legged things with too many eyes. They followed him silently, waiting for weakness. He raised his pistol, fired once. The blast cracked against the stone and sent the creatures skittering back into the shadows. Not gone, but wary. By the time night fell, he saw a faint glow in the distance. A fire. He crept closer, careful with his steps, until he spotted her. The alien girl sat cross-legged by the flames, the stone map resting in her lap. Her blade lay beside her, within easy reach. She hummed softly in a language David didn't understand, her voice carrying a strange, haunting rhythm that made the canyon walls feel alive. David pressed himself against the rocks, debating. He could rush her, maybe catch her off guard. Or he could wait and see what she was trying to do with the map. Then, without warning, she spoke. "You can come out, human. I know you're there." His heart jumped. For a moment he thought of running. But then he stepped into the light of the fire. Her glowing eyes rose to meet his, calm but sharp. Persistent. "I'll give you that. You stole from me," David said, his voice low. "I'm not leaving without it." She tilted her head, considering him. Then, to his surprise, she pushed the map toward him across the sand. "Take it," she said softly. He hesitated. "What game are you playing?" "No game," she replied. "If you want to follow this path, then you should know what it truly means. Once you see, you will wish I had never taken it." David stared at her, caught off guard. The fire flickered between them, shadows twisting across her face. He saw no mockery there now, no thief's arrogance, only something deeper, fear. And against his better judgment, he sat down across from her. For a long time, the only sound between them was the crackling of the fire and the distant hiss of desert winds weaving through the canyon walls. David studied the girl in silence, weighing his options. She had stolen from him, lied, fought him, and yet now, here she was, offering the map back like it was poison she no longer wished to hold. "Why?" he asked finally. Her eyes flicked to the flames. "Because you don't understand what you're chasing. The path this map reveals, it's not treasure, not glory, it's a grave." David let out a humorless laugh. "Every archaeologist I know has been warned away by someone. Grave, curse, doom. It all sounds the same until you actually find something worth keeping. I've chased ghosts my whole life, and this is the first time the trail has led me to something real." Her expression didn't change. She picked up a small piece of charcoal from the fire, pressed it against the stone slab, and traced one of the glowing lines. "Do you know what these marks mean, human?" "David," he said sharply. "Not human." She raised an eyebrow. "David," she repeated slowly, tasting the word. "Do you know what they mean?" He leaned forward, squinting at the tablet. "I thought it was a map. Topographic, maybe. Rivers, mountains, trails." She shook her head. "These aren't paths to guide travelers. They are seals. Wards carved by my ancestors when the sky burned and the titans fell. Each line is not a road. It is a chain." David frowned, his excitement souring. "Chains?" She met his gaze, her voice dropping. "Chains strong enough to hold gods." The fire popped, and the shadows leapt high against the canyon walls. For a moment, David said nothing. He wanted to scoff, to call it superstition, but there had been something in her tone, an edge of memory, not myth. He exhaled slowly. "Gods, or things your people thought were gods?" Her jaw tightened. "My tribe calls them the fallen. Titans that shook the earth when they landed. Machines so vast that their breath was thunder, their gaze lightning. They slept for 1,000 years beneath the sand, and when they woke, they brought death to everything that walked or flew. My people fought them. They lost. But something sealed the titans below, and they gave us the duty to keep the chains unbroken. David stared into the fire, the flames reflecting in his tired eyes. Machines buried in the sand. It sounded insane. And yet, he thought of how his scanner had died the moment it touched the tablet. How the grooves had glowed faintly beneath his fingers. That wasn't just stone. It was something else. Something old. And you think this map is what? A warning? Yes, she said. And you, David the archaeologist, were ready to dig it up for glory. He bristled. I wasn't chasing glory. I was chasing truth. Her eyes softened, but only slightly. Truth can kill just as easily as lies. Silence again. The desert wind howled like some distant beast. David finally gestured at her with his chin. What's your name? For a moment, she hesitated, as if the word itself were dangerous. Then she said, Emily. He blinked. Emily? That's not exactly alien. Her lips twitched in what might have been the hint of a smile. It is the name my people gave me when I studied among humans. You wouldn't be able to pronounce the real one. Fair enough. Emily leaned back against the rocks, staring at the stars as if they held memories only she could see. David tried to follow her gaze, but all he saw were constellations scattered like shattered glass across the sky. Finally, she said, If you really want to follow this map, then you will not go alone. The seals were not made for humans. The path is full of traps, guardians, and worse. If you step wrong, the chains break. And if the chains break, the fallen rise again. David narrowed his eyes. So you'll stop me if I try? No, she looked back at him, and her voice was steady. I'll go with you, to make sure you survive long enough to regret it. David almost laughed, but her expression was too serious. Instead, he rubbed his temples and muttered, This is insane. Still, he couldn't deny the pull inside him. The curiosity that burned hotter than fear. He'd chased scraps of history across half the galaxy, and now the real prize was in his grasp. He wasn't going to walk away. Fine, he said at last. We'll go together. Emily gave a slow nod, as if she'd expected nothing else. The fire burned low as the night deepened. Somewhere in the canyon, the scavenger creatures clicked and hissed, restless. David shifted, uneasy. We should keep watch. No need, Emily said quietly. They won't come closer. Why not? Because they fear me. David glanced at her. She hadn't moved, hadn't even looked at him. But something about the way she said it made his skin prickle. He decided not to ask. The night stretched on. By dawn, the fire was ash, and the desert air shimmered with heat again. They set out together, following the faint glow of the tablet's markings. Emily walked with quiet purpose, her blade strapped at her side, her eyes scanning the ridges with cautious precision. David trudged beside her, his mind racing with possibilities. The terrain grew harsher as the day went on. Jagged stone formations jutted up like broken teeth, casting shadows that seemed to shift when no one was looking. The map's lines glowed faintly in Emily's hands, pulling them forward. By midday, the silence was broken by distant chanting. Both froze, exchanging a sharp glance. Cultists, Emily whispered. The ones who worship the fallen. They believe the Titans will rise again and cleanse the galaxy. David swallowed hard. And what do they do to people like us? Her expression was grim. They make sacrifices. They crept closer, crouching behind a ridge. Below, in a sunken hollow, a dozen figures in tattered robes knelt around a pit. Their voices rose in harsh rhythm, chanting in a language that scraped against David's ears like rusted metal. At the center of their circle was a monolith, black stone covered in the same glowing grooves as the tablet. But these lines pulsed, faintly alive, as if responding to the cultists' voices. David's stomach dropped. That's a seal, Emily finished. And they're trying to break it. Before David could react, one of the robed figures lifted their head, sniffing the air. A pair of gleaming eyes locked onto their hiding place. The chanting stopped. The cultists screamed, and the others rose as one, their robes snapping back to reveal pale, scarred faces and blades fashioned from alien bone. Emily cursed under her breath. Run! But they were already surrounded. Sand crunched underfoot as the cultists closed in, their eyes gleaming with fanatic hunger. Their chants had stopped, but the rhythm of their footsteps felt like a drumbeat of inevitability. David's pistol was already in his hand, his heart hammering so hard it drowned out everything else. Emily didn't hesitate. She drew her blade, its curved edge glowing with a faint blue light. She shifted into a stance so natural, so practiced, that David realized just how many times she must have stood like this before. The first cultist lunged, bone dagger raised high. Emily met him mid-strike, her blade flashing. The man dropped before his scream could leave his throat. David fired at the next. The energy bolt tore through his chest, sending him sprawling backward. His hands shook, but the instinct to survive overpowered his fear. More of them surged forward. Too many. Emily barked a word in her own language, harsh and sharp, then shouted in his, "Move! To the ridge." They backed toward the rocks, fighting step by step. David fired until his pistol clicked empty, then swung it like a club to knock a dagger from a zealot's hands. The man snarled and clawed at him, teeth filed to points, but Emily's blade cut him down before David could blink. The cultists didn't fear death. That made them dangerous. They threw themselves forward with wild abandon, their voices rising again in broken chants as if each drop of blood spilled was another offering. By the time David and Emily scrambled up the ridge, they were both smeared with dust and sweat. The cultists clawed after them, howling. Emily slashed downward, knocking one loose. He fell back into the pit with a sickening crunch. But more kept coming. Too many, David gasped. Emily's eyes flicked toward the monolith below. The grooves glowed brighter now, pulsing in rhythm with the cultists' cries. She swore under her breath. They've awakened it. Before David could ask what she meant, the ground trembled. The monolith split down the center with a sound like stone screaming. From within the pit, something stirred, something massive. The cultists threw themselves to their knees, arms raised in worship. David stared in horror as a colossal hand of black metal clawed its way out of the earth. "Tell me that's not what I think it is," he whispered. Emily's face was grim. A guardian, not a titan, but one of their sentinels, built to destroy anything that disturbs the seals. The hand slammed into the ground, and a body followed, towering, skeletal in shape, its chest glowing with burning embers. Its head turned slowly, and when its eyes ignited with molten light, the desert itself seemed to hold its breath. The cultists screamed praises, throwing themselves prostrate before the machine. But the guardian didn't look at them. It looked at David and Emily. And then it moved. Its first step shook the ridge beneath their feet. Stone shattered, sending David stumbling. Emily grabbed his arm and yanked him upright just before a massive hand smashed into the spot where he'd fallen. The impact sent shards of rock flying like shrapnel. "Run!" Emily shouted again, pulling him. They sprinted along the ridge, sand spilling away beneath their boots. The guardian followed, each stride impossibly long, its glowing chest casting flickering shadows across the canyon walls. David's lungs burned, his legs screaming. "We can't outrun that." Emily's eyes darted wildly, scanning the rocks. Then she spotted a narrow crevice, a crack in the canyon wall barely wide enough for them. There! They dove into the gap just as the guardian's hand slammed down behind them, the impact so close that the force threw David against the stone wall. He gasped, ears ringing. But Emily yanked him up again, forcing him deeper into the darkness. The crevice twisted and narrowed until they could barely squeeze through. Behind them, the guardian's molten eyes burned at the entrance, but its massive body couldn't follow. It clawed at the stone, roaring, the sound like thunder in a steel drum. Dust and shards rained down on them, but the canyon wall held. Finally, the sound faded. The guardian's footsteps retreated, the echoes rumbling into silence. David collapsed against the wall, gasping for air. His chest heaved, sweat dripping down his face. What the hell was that? Emily leaned against the opposite wall, her own breath heavy, but her eyes still sharp. That was just a sentinel. A warning. If the guardians still walk, it means the seals are weakening faster than I thought. David shook his head, laughing bitterly. You call that a warning? That thing nearly crushed me into paste. She almost smiled. And yet here you are, alive. Perhaps you are more useful than I thought. He scowled. Glad I'm proving myself to my kidnapper. I did not kidnap you. You stole the map. You followed anyway. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. She wasn't wrong. For a while, they just stood there in the dark, catching their breath. The narrow passage seemed endless, the air thick with dust. David finally asked, "Where does this go?" Emily touched the map, its faint glow illuminating the stone around them. The lines shimmered faintly, pointing forward, deeper, to the next seal. If the cultists have already begun breaking them, we must reach the core before they do. David frowned. And what happens if they succeed? Emily's voice was soft, but heavy with weight. Then the Titans wake, and when they wake, nothing in this galaxy survives. The silence after her words was heavier than stone. David pushed off the wall, wiping sweat and dust from his brow. His body still trembled, but something in him had shifted. Curiosity was still there, burning hot, but now it was joined by something else. Responsibility. All right, he muttered. Then let's make sure they stay asleep. Emily gave him a long look, unreadable, then nodded once. Together, they pushed deeper into the darkness. The passage twisted downward like a throat swallowing them into the earth. The light from Emily's map was the only thing keeping the dark at bay, a faint blue glow that danced across jagged walls. Every drip of unseen water echoed too loudly, and every crunch of their boots on loose gravel felt like it might awaken something ancient slumbering in the stone. David ran his hand along the wall, feeling deep grooves carved into the rock. They weren't natural. They were deliberate. This whole tunnel, it's part of the seal, isn't it? Emily's gaze flicked to him. Yes, the chains are not only carved in maps. They are carved into the world itself. Labyrinths, guardians, traps, all designed to keep what lies beneath from ever walking again. David's mouth went dry. So we're literally walking into a cage built to hold gods. Her eyes glinted faintly in the glow. Or devils. The air grew colder as they descended, the walls damp with condensation. Soon, the tunnel opened into a wide cavern, its ceiling lost in shadows. Strange stone pillars rose around them, carved with the same symbols as the map. Some were cracked, others toppled, but most still pulsed with faint light. David tilted his head back, awe mingling with fear. This isn't natural. Someone built this. Emily ran her hand across a pillar, tracing the glowing grooves. Not someone. An empire older than your species. They fought the fallen when my people were still chasing shadows. This is their graveyard of chains. David's chest tightened. An extinct race that had fought titans, leaving only ruins and warnings. He wanted to ask more, but a sudden click beneath his boot froze him in place. Emily's eyes snapped down. Don't move. David swallowed hard, sweat beading on his forehead. He looked down to see a faint circle glowing around his foot. That's not good, is it? Emily crouched, her voice sharp but steady. Pressure trigger. Ancient but still alive. Move wrong and this chamber will bury us both. David's heart pounded like a drum. No pressure, then. She shot him a flat look that said she wasn't in the mood for his humor. Carefully, she slid her blade beneath his boot, levering it against the stone. The circle of light flickered, but didn't release. Step back, she murmured. He obeyed, shifting his weight as carefully as he could. For a moment, the glow flared brighter, and then died. The circle vanished. David staggered back, gasping. That was too close. Emily rose smoothly, slipping her blade away. This entire path will be like that. Do not let your curiosity blind your steps. They moved slower after that, every footfall deliberate. The cavern stretched into a network of tunnels and bridges carved above bottomless chasms. The walls glittered with veins of crystal that pulsed faintly in rhythm with some unseen heartbeat. David couldn't tell if it was the earth itself or something deeper. At one narrow bridge, the air shimmered with heat. Emily stopped him with a hand on his chest. Energy trap, invisible flames. Step into it, and you will burn before you can scream. David eyed the gap ahead. So, how do we get across? She studied the walls, then pointed to a faint groove running along the edge. There, a bypass, but it will require balance. He groaned. Of course it does. One at a time, they edged along the groove, pressing their backs to the cold stone. The drop below was endless, the shimmer of the energy trap just inches away. David's hands slipped with sweat, his boots scraping. For a moment, his balance wavered, and his stomach lurched. Emily grabbed his wrist, steadying him with surprising strength. Eyes forward, she murmured. The abyss only wins if you look down. He swallowed hard and forced his gaze ahead. Together, they made it across. Hours blurred. Trap after trap, seal after seal. Blades that swung from ceilings. Floors that crumbled into pits. Statues that spat bolts of energy when approached too quickly. Each one was older than history, and each one still deadly. By the time they stumbled into another cavern, David's shirt clung to him with sweat, and his legs felt like stone. He dropped against a wall, chest heaving. How many more of these are there? Emily knelt beside the tablet, watching as the lines glowed brighter. We are close to the heart. David closed his eyes, trying to will away the exhaustion. And what do we do when we get there? Seal it tighter? Or we die trying, Emily said flatly. He cracked one eye open. Comforting. But she wasn't looking at him. She was staring deeper into the cavern. Her face had gone pale. David followed her gaze, and his stomach dropped. At the far end of the cavern stood a colossal figure. Not moving. Not alive. A statue of black metal. Humanoid in shape, its surface scarred and cracked. Its head nearly brushed the cavern ceiling. Chains of glowing crystal wrapped around its limbs, binding it to the walls. David whispered, Is that a titan? Emily's voice was barely audible. No, a husk, a corpse of one. The thing was terrifying even in death. Its eyes were hollow sockets. Its chest caved in where something unimaginably powerful had once burned. Yet even as a ruin, its presence made David feel small, insignificant, like a child standing at the feet of a god. He took a shaky step closer. So they really existed. Emily's hand shot out, gripping his arm. Do not touch it. Even dead, the husks remember. If the wrong spark awakens them. Her warning was cut off by a sound that chilled them both. Footsteps. Not theirs. Dozens of them. From the shadows on the other side of the cavern, robed figures emerged, torches in their hands. Their chants rose again, louder this time, echoing off the cavern walls. And at their center, taller than the rest, was a figure draped in crimson cloth, a mask of polished bone covering his face. Emily hissed, High Priest. David's gut tightened. Of course. The cultists fanned out, surrounding the husk of the titan. Their torches blazed higher, their chants rising in fever pitch. The high priest lifted his hands, and the grooves on the titan's chains flickered. Emily's eyes went wide. They're breaking the seal. David's hand went for his pistol. Then we stopped them. Emily's blade sang as she drew it free, her expression like sharpened steel. Then we stopped them. They charged. The cavern exploded into chaos. Emily darted ahead like a streak of violet lightning, her blade flashing arcs of blue fire in the torchlight. David fired from behind her, his pistol cracking with each shot. The first two cultists dropped before they even understood what was happening, but the others surged forward with fanatical cries. The high priest's voice thundered above them all, his chant twisting the air itself. The chains binding the titan husk pulsed brighter, one link flickering, then another. Dust rained from the ceiling as if the very earth was groaning. Emily cut through the first wave, spinning her blade with precision that bordered on artistry. She parried a bone spear, drove her elbow into the zealot's chest, and finished him with a single thrust. Another cultist swung a jagged axe. Emily ducked low, and David's pistol barked over her shoulder, dropping the attacker in a heap. But there were too many. For every cultist that fell, two more pushed forward. Their chants grew louder, more frenzied, the rhythm of their voices syncing with the flicker of the Titan's chains. David shouted over the din, "We can't hold them off forever." Emily's eyes snapped to the high priest. "Then we cut off the head." Together they pushed forward, hacking and firing through the mob. David's pistol ran dry again. He hurled it into the face of a cultist and ripped a dagger from another's belt, fighting with desperate swings. His arms ached, his lungs burned, but he refused to stop. The high priest raised his staff high, and the cavern roared. The Titan husk shuddered. One chain shattered with a deafening crack, shards of crystal raining down like falling stars. Emily cursed. "Too late, he's breaking it." She leapt at the priest, but a barrier of energy flared to life around him, shimmering like molten glass. The force flung her back across the stone floor. She landed hard, her blade skittering away. "Emily!" David cried, but cultists swarmed between them. He fought, slashing wildly, blood slicking his hands. One zealot screamed as David drove the dagger into his throat, but another slammed into him from behind. They went down hard. The breath knocked from David's chest. He rolled, narrowly avoiding a blade plunging for his ribs. His arm snapped upward, stabbing clumsily but enough to drop his attacker. He scrambled to his feet, stumbling, bleeding but still moving. Emily rose again, staggering, her face pale but her eyes blazing. She seized her fallen blade and roared, charging once more. The high priest's chant reached a fever pitch, and a second chain cracked. The Titan husk's eyes flickered faintly, as if remembering life. David's stomach twisted with horror. If that thing woke, they were all dead. Cultists, him, Emily, everyone. He looked at the chains, then at the glowing grooves on the floor. His mind raced, connecting dots from the map, from the carvings, from Emily's warnings. The chains weren't just locks. They were circuits. Energy. If they could break, they could also be redirected. "Emily!" he shouted. "The pillars!" She slashed a cultist aside and glanced at him, fury and confusion in her face. "What? The pillars!" he cried, pointing. "They're not just supports. They're part of the seal. If we reroute them..." Understanding flashed in her eyes. She pivoted immediately, racing toward the nearest glowing pillar. Her blade slashed through the cultists guarding it, her movements fueled by renewed purpose. She drove the blade into the groove at its base, twisting. Sparks erupted. The glow shifted, no longer feeding the Titan but circling outward instead. The high priest screamed in rage. His chant faltered, his eyes blazing behind the bone mask. "Blasphemers!" David threw himself at the next pillar, hacking at the lines carved into it with the stolen dagger. The stone resisted, but the grooves cracked, spilling light. The Titan husk shuddered, its eye sockets flickering weaker now, as if confused. Emily shouted from across the cavern, "Keep going!" The cultists realized what was happening. They shrieked in panic, rushing to stop them. David fought with everything left in him, slashing, punching, kicking, every move desperate but fueled by the one thought burning in his chest. Not here. Not today. Humanity survives. He smashed his dagger into another groove. Light flared. The ground trembled. Emily reached the final pillar. With a roar, she drove her blade into its core. The cavern blazed with blinding brilliance. The chains around the Titan husk flared like suns before collapsing inward. Energy surged through the carvings, no longer unraveling but binding. The Titan husk let out a sound, half roar, half scream, as if its memory of life was being torn away. Then it slumped, motionless once more, its eyes going dark forever. The cultists froze, their chants broken. The high priest howled in despair, his body shaking with fury. He lifted his staff, energy crackling. Emily was faster. She hurled her blade, and it struck him clean through the chest. The barrier shattered with him. He staggered, choking, and collapsed to the ground. Silence. The remaining cultists dropped their weapons, some wailing, others fleeing into the shadows. The cavern was theirs. David fell to his knees, chest heaving, blood soaking his sleeve. He laughed weakly, almost in disbelief. We did it." Emily stood over the fallen priest, her chest rising and falling, her eyes still hard. Slowly, she turned to David. For the first time, her expression softened. "Yes," she said. "We did." They stared at each other across the ruin of the chamber, the dead titan looming behind them like a defeated nightmare. For the first time, David saw not just a thief, not just an alien, but a partner. He managed a crooked grin. "So, still glad you stole my map?" Her lips curved into the faintest smile. "If I hadn't, you would be dead already." "Fair point." He chuckled, then winced at the pain. "But I'm starting to think maybe, just maybe, humans aren't as reckless as you thought." Emily's smile widened slightly. "No, you are far more reckless. But perhaps that is what the galaxy needs." The cavern stank of smoke and blood. The titan husk loomed above them, still bound but scarred with new cracks, its chains glowing faintly with redirected energy. David pressed his sleeve against the cut on his arm, wincing, while Emily prowled the chamber, scanning for surviving threats. When she finally returned to him, her expression was calmer, though her blade dripped with cultist blood. "We cannot stay here. The cult will return with more. And if one husk is this close to waking, the others will not be far behind." David pushed himself unsteadily to his feet. His whole body ached, but his mind was sharper than ever. "Others? How many are we talking?" Emily's eyes flicked to the map still glowing faintly in her hands. "Dozens. Scattered across this desert. Across the world. Every chain connects to the core. And if that is broken, the Titans rise," David finished grimly. She nodded. They left the chamber through a narrow arch at the back, following a descending passage lined with faintly glowing veins of crystal. The air grew thicker, heavier, as though they were moving into the lungs of some buried beast. For a while they said nothing. The silence pressed on David's ears until he finally broke it. "You knew what these things were. At least your people's version of the story. Why didn't you destroy the map instead of chasing it?" Emily's steps slowed. Her glowing eyes caught the light as she glanced at him. "Because the map is not only a key, it is also a lock. Without it, we cannot reinforce the seals. My tribe believes the fallen will rise again no matter what we do. I chose to see for myself." David studied her face, the sharp angles softened by exhaustion. "So you're not a thief after all. You're what? A guardian?" She gave a faint, humorless laugh. "A heretic in the eyes of my people. I broke their law when I took the map. They would rather let prophecy play out than try to fight it." "Sounds familiar," David muttered. "My own people think I'm crazy for chasing ruins. Guess we both don't fit where we're supposed to." Emily tilted her head, regarding him more closely. "Maybe that is why we are both still alive." They walked on. The passage wound deeper until it opened into a colossal chamber unlike anything David had ever seen. The walls were smooth, black stone veined with glowing lines that converged at the center, where a massive structure rose like an inverted pyramid. The entire chamber hummed faintly, a low vibration that David felt in his bones. Emily's voice was reverent. "The core." David's breath caught. He stepped closer, eyes wide. The pyramid was covered in carvings. Not the flowing script of Emily's people, but harsh, angular lines that radiated precision and purpose. In the grooves, faint pulses of light traveled like currents in a circuit board. He realized with a jolt that this wasn't stone at all. It was machinery. "Emily," his voice was hoarse. "This isn't divine. This is engineered. All of it." She nodded slowly. "I know. My people speak of gods and prophecy, but I studied the human sciences. These are machines. The fallen were never gods, they were weapons. built by a race older than both of ours. A race that burned itself out. David ran his hands along the grooves, marveling and horrified at once. So these titans, they're leftovers. Soldiers without a war. Yes. Emily's eyes darkened. Soldiers that will destroy everything if unchained. The realization sat heavy in his chest. The map hadn't been a guide to treasure or even history. It was a warning label, a containment system, and he had been ready to rip it open without hesitation. Emily touched the surface of the core, her fingers glowing faintly. The cult is trying to reverse the chains. They believe the titans will rise and grant them power. But if we can strengthen the flow of energy here, we may be able to seal them forever. David swallowed. And if we fail? Her voice was flat. Then the sky burns again. They worked their way around the core, examining the connections. Strange conduits of crystal led from the pyramid into the earth, pulsing faintly like veins feeding a heart. Some of them were cracked, leaking sparks into the air. David crouched to examine one. These need repair. Whoever built this, they used energy flows like circuitry. If I can patch the breaks, we might stabilize it. Emily arched a brow. You know how? He smiled crookedly. Archaeologist, remember? Half my job is figuring out how dead civilizations wired their toys. She studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Then I will guard while you work. He set to it, carefully bridging the cracks with shards of nearby crystal, reattaching severed grooves with bits of conductive metal from his gear. The core responded in faint pulses, growing stronger with each repair. But as the light brightened, a sound stirred in the depths. A grinding, a shifting. David froze. Tell me that's the core stabilizing. Emily's face went pale. Her hand tightened on her blade. No. Something is waking. The floor shook, cracks racing across the stone. From the shadows at the far side of the chamber, a massive form rose. Not as big as the titan husk above, but larger than the sentinel they'd faced. A guardian, armored in black steel, its head crowned with jagged spines. Its eyes ignited with molten fire, locking on to them. David cursed under his breath. Of course, it couldn't be easy. Emily stepped forward, blade raised. Keep working. I will hold it. David's eyes widened. Hold it? That thing's 3 times your size. She didn't look back. Then you'd better work fast, human. The guardian roared, and the chamber shook as it charged. Emily met it head-on. The guardian slammed into the chamber floor with a thunderous impact, sending shards of crystal and stone flying in every direction. Emily rolled to the side, her blade slicing a groove across its armored leg. Sparks flew where metal met metal, and the creature let out a screech like grinding gears. David's hands trembled as he adjusted the final crystal shard on the core. Every second felt stretched, every movement critical. A misalignment now could mean the core destabilizing, and if that happened, he didn't want to think about it. Emily! He shouted over the roar of the guardian. I'm almost there. She didn't answer. Instead, she ducked under the guardian's swinging arm, slashing upward, and narrowly avoided being crushed. She grunted as the force slammed her back against the wall, her blade clanging uselessly against thick plating. The guardian pivoted, its glowing eyes locking on David, took a step toward him, every movement precise, calculating, almost intelligent. Emily's voice rang out, sharp and commanding. Move! Get to the core! David dove to the side as the guardian swiped. Dust and fragments rained down on him. His heart pounded, sweat stinging his eyes, but he forced himself to focus. He could see the flow of energy along the conduits, the gaps he had just repaired. They were holding, but barely. Emily leapt onto the guardian's back, her blade sparking as she dug into an energy vent. The creature twisted violently, throwing her across the chamber. David flinched, then shook his head and returned to work. Almost. Just a little more, he muttered. His fingers worked furiously, connecting a final set of crystals and sealing the last fractured conduit. The core pulsed with a brighter light, sending waves of energy through the veins in the chamber floor. The guardian froze mid-step, its head jerking as if in pain. Sparks erupted from its body, circuits shorting as the redirected energy reached it. Emily rolled to her feet, grinning fiercely, and charged again. The Guardian tried to swing, but David's last adjustments had changed the energy flow. Lightning-like arcs of energy from the core lanced toward the creature, immobilizing its limbs. The Guardian roared in frustration, thrashing violently, but the core's energy bound it tighter with each pulse. Emily moved swiftly, climbing onto the creature, slicing grooves along its energy channels. Sparks danced across her blade, illuminating her determined face. David stepped back, panting, watching as the core hummed in harmony with the conduits. He could see the light racing through the floor, feeding into the bindings that held not only this Guardian but the entire network of Titans. Finally, with a loud, grinding wail, the Guardian collapsed to the ground, sparking and twitching, then lay still. The core's glow steadied, its light bathing the chamber in a calm, steady pulse. Emily jumped down, panting heavily, but her eyes were alive with exhilaration. That should keep it contained for now. David wiped sweat from his forehead, slumping to the floor beside her. For now? You mean there's more? Emily's lips tightened. There are always more, but this is enough to buy time. Time to learn, to prepare, to stop them for good. The core's network is stable again, and these machines will not rise while we guard them. David looked around the chamber, finally taking in the enormity of what they had just done. I never imagined fighting gods was actually fighting machines. Emily smirked faintly. Legends are built that way, human. Gods, monsters, heroes. It all makes the truth more palatable. He laughed quietly, shaking his head. Well, I think I'm ready for the truth now. They sat in silence for a moment, the core's light pulsing steadily, a heartbeat against the vast darkness of the chamber. Around them lay the remnants of the cult, scattered and defeated. The Titan husks quieted once more. Emily finally spoke, softer this time. You could leave. Go back to your world. Forget all of this. No one would blame you. David looked at her, the exhaustion and relief in his eyes mixing with newfound resolve. And leave you to guard this thing alone? Not a chance. Her eyes softened, almost imperceptibly. Then, we continue together. David nodded. Together. The chamber hummed with a steady, restrained energy. Outside, the desert wind blew across ancient ruins and shattered temples. But within the core's walls, a fragile peace settled. For now, the fallen Titans were sealed, their secret locked away, their danger postponed. Emily sheathed her blade, and for the first time, David felt a strange sense of hope, an understanding that they were not just survivors of the past, but guardians of the future. And somewhere deep beneath the stone and circuits, the ancient machines slept, unaware that the human and alien had rewritten their fate. The core's pulse echoed through the chamber, steady now. But David and Emily both knew it was only a temporary lull. Outside, the desert night stretched endlessly, stars burning like distant warnings. They had survived the Guardian, stabilized the core, and kept the Titans at bay. But the deeper truth still awaited them. David ran his hand along the smooth surface of the core. Emily, these machines, they're everywhere, aren't they? Buried, waiting. Emily nodded, her eyes distant. Yes, not just here. The ancient race left them scattered across the planet, in ruins, under oceans, even beneath cities. Some are dormant, some are half awake. That's why the map exists. It doesn't lead you to them. Keeps you from breaking the seals. David swallowed hard. So everything we've seen, the prophecy, the cult, the legends, they were all warnings disguised as stories. Warnings, Emily confirmed. Legends survive because humans need them. Our people made prophecies to remember the danger without ever fully understanding it. And the map, it was meant to test the worthy, to ensure only those who could comprehend the truth might act to stop the fallen. David studied her for a long moment. And now we're those worthy ones, huh? Emily gave a faint smile. Seems so, but the responsibility, is ours, human. You, me, and anyone we trust to understand the core. To guard it. To make sure the Titans never rise again. David looked around at the dark chamber, lit by the calm glow of the core, and felt the weight of it settle on his shoulders. He knew their journey wasn't over. It might never truly end. But for the first time, he felt a strange, firm resolve. They weren't just chasing ruins or surviving legends. They were protecting the world. A soft vibration ran through the chamber floor. Emily's eyes snapped to the walls, alert. Another seal weakening, she muttered. David looked at the map Emily still held, its carvings glowing faintly. Then we fix it. Together. One seal at a time. They moved through the chamber, checking conduits and repairing fractures. Their hands steady now, their teamwork honed by the battle. For each repair, the core pulsed brighter, radiating warmth instead of the ominous hum from before. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time felt different here, measured by the heartbeat of the machines, not by the sun or stars. But finally, they stood back and surveyed their work. Every conduit was connected, every crack patched. The core glowed evenly, peacefully, as if acknowledging their success. Emily finally exhaled. It's done, for now. David let himself sit on the floor, exhausted but relieved. For now, he echoed. He glanced at her, and for the first time, he didn't feel like the human alone in a strange, dangerous world. He felt like part of a team, a partnership built not on bloodlines or species, but on trust, courage, and the shared burden of saving what must be protected. Emily sheathed her blade, walking over to him. We should leave before anyone else comes searching for the core. David nodded. Agreed. But first we document this. History will need to know the truth, carefully, without endangering anyone. Emily's eyes softened. Perhaps someday. For now. The secret sleeps again, and so do the Titans. They emerged from the chamber as the first light of dawn brushed the desert horizon. The ruins glowed faintly in the early sun, silent witnesses to what had happened. The desert wind carried no threats now, only the quiet promise of survival. David looked at Emily and smiled, a genuine, tired grin. We make a good team, alien girl. She smirked back. Don't call me that again, human. He laughed. Deal. Together, they walked across the dunes, leaving the core behind but carrying its truth with them. The map was safe, the Titans were sealed, and the world slept peacefully, unaware that its fate had been rewritten by two unlikely allies. In the distance, a faint shimmer hinted at other machines buried beneath the sands. But for now, the world was theirs to protect. And as long as they stood together, nothing, god, machine, or legend, could rise to undo what they had accomplished. And so, David and Emily disappeared into the horizon, two guardians bound not by blood or prophecy, but by courage, trust, and the knowledge that some secrets were too dangerous to forget, and too important to let fall into the wrong hands. The desert was quiet. The core pulsed beneath the earth. The Titans slept. And the adventure, though far from over, had reached a satisfying, hard-earned peace.